"You're a failure, Mom." Those 4 words still echo inside me as if they were spoken yesterday. They cut through the air, pierced my chest, and got stuck somewhere time still can't reach. For a moment, the world just stopped. Her voice, my daughter's voice, sounded different. Cold, impatient, as if she wasn't talking to the woman who raised her anymore, but to a stranger. And right then, I realized that love also has sounds that can hurt. I remember the exact moment. She was standing there, arms crossed, eyes hard, defending what she believed was the truth. I just froze, trying to understand what I had done so wrong to deserve that. Her words didn't come with screams, but with something far worse, contempt, the kind of look that can erase an entire story with a single sentence. I wanted to answer back, to say that failure is giving up, and I never did. But the words wouldn't come out. They got stuck in my throat, suffocated by shock, because deep down, I couldn't believe that. Judgment came from the person I loved most in this world. The silence that followed was crueler than any argument. She turned her face away, grabbed her keys, and left. The door slammed, and that sound echoed like a period at the end of a sentence. But it wasn't just any ending. It was the end of something I thought could never be broken. I stood there, staring into nothing. The tears came slowly, shyly, as if asking for permission to fall. Each one carried a piece of what was left of me. And in that moment, I asked myself, when does love turn into judgment? When did my daughter stop seeing in me the woman who fought so hard to see her succeed? But I don't want you to think this is only my story. It's also the story of thousands of mothers who at some point in their lives heard words that cut deeper than any wound. Mothers who've been called weak, useless, dramatic, wrong. Mothers who, even after all the hurt, still love with the same strength. Wherever you're listening from, your city, your state, your country, maybe you've lived something similar too. Tell me in the comments where you're from. I want to know how far this pain reaches, because I know it's universal. It has no border, no language. Love and heartbreak speak the same tongue anywhere in the world. As she walked away that day, I thought about everything I went through so she could get where she is. The sleepless nights, the fears I hid, the bills I paid late, the dreams I tucked away in a drawer to open. Later, and that later never came. All that ran through my mind in a single second. The whole time, I kept seeing her as a little girl, running through the living room, laughing, tripping over her own feet. I could almost smell her hair again, hear that very first cry. Remember those nights I stayed awake just to make sure she was still breathing fine. And suddenly, all of that, every memory, every moment, seemed erased by one single sentence. "You're a failure, Mom." Maybe she didn't even realize the weight those words carried. Maybe she said them in the heat of the moment, angry, tired, confused. But to me, they stayed, etched. Because when an insult comes from a stranger, it's just wind. When it comes from your child, it's a storm. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of it all. I replayed every conversation, every gesture, every silence. And the more I thought about it, the more it hurt. I realized that life is made of seasons we don't get to choose. And sometimes the love we nurture the most is the one that one day makes us bleed. People look at me and see an ordinary woman, but no one imagines what hides behind a quiet smile. No one knows the weight a mother carries when her own child makes her feel small, because it's not just pride that breaks, it's the soul. For days I tried to put my feelings back in order. I'd stare at my phone, waiting for a message that never came. I walked around the house in silence, listening to the echo of my own steps. Every corner held a memory of her. The tablecloth I chose thinking of her, the coffee cup she used every morning, the old photos I kept on the shelf. Everything was a memory. Everything was pain. And yet, through the tears, I realized something. A mother's love is stubborn. Even wounded, it doesn't go away. It retreats, hides for a while, tries to heal, but it's still there. The truth is, no words, not even the cruelest ones, can kill that love completely. It may go quiet, but it never dies. While trying to pull myself together, I remembered something my own mother used to say. One day, your children will understand what they can't see today. Back then, I didn't really get what she meant. Now it makes perfect sense, because sometimes love needs to be hurt before it's understood. I know I'm not perfect. No mother is. We make mistakes trying to do right. We talk too much when we should listen. We protect when we should let go. But none of us deserves to be called a failure. Because failure, to me, means giving up. And I never did. So when she called me that, a part of me rebelled. I thought about all the times she wanted to quit, and I was the one who stayed up, holding her hand, telling her it was worth it to keep going. I thought about every time she cried, and I was the one who wiped her tears. Every time she fell, and I was the one who taught her how to get back up. And then I asked myself, how can someone who learned strength from me call me weak? The answer didn't come that day. Not that week. Maybe it will take years. Because understanding a child's heart is like trying to read the wind. It changes direction all the time. But I won't lie to you. It hurt. It still does. Her voice still lives inside me, repeating that sentence like a scar that never fully heals. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the clock ticks slow, I still hear it. And I wonder if one day she'll understand what she said. And that's why I'm here, telling this story. Because maybe, somehow, what I went through is what you're going through too. Maybe you've also been called a failure, not by enemies, but by the ones you love most. And if that happened to you, I want you to know this. You're not alone. Love hurts, but it also teaches. And sometimes, it's through pain that we discover our true worth. After hearing those words, "You're a failure, Mom," time stopped inside me. I spent days trying to understand what had happened, replaying every detail, every memory, as if searching for a hidden reason buried somewhere in my mind. I couldn't sleep. At night, lying in the dark, I replayed the scene like a movie I couldn't turn off. Her eyes, sharp and steady, the coldness in her voice, and that phrase, echoing again and again in the silence of my room. I kept asking myself what made her say that. Did I really disappoint her that much? Were all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, not enough to prove I gave her my best? Because deep down, I knew I wasn't a perfect mother, but I also knew I was there. I was strong. I was home. I remembered when she was little. I'd work all day, yet still find time to cook dinner, help with her homework, sit by her bed and make up stories on the spot just to see her smile. She'd look at me with those curious, loving eyes and say, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I'd smile and reply, "I hope you'll be even better." And now, to hear that same mouth call me a failure, it felt like life had come full circle in the cruelest way. I thought about all the dreams I gave up for her, the courses I never took, the trips I didn't go on, the opportunities I let pass, not because anyone forced me to, but because love demands choices. I chose to stay, to be present, to care. I chose the harder road, but the one that made sense to me. And still, one day, she looked at me and saw failure where there had always been love. What hurt most wasn't the judgment, it was the ingratitude. Because a mother's love is so quiet that the world often mistakes it for weakness. I endured humiliation, swallowed my pride, fought against scarcity, made miracles out of nothing, all so she'd never feel what it was like to go without. And now, it was as if all that had turned invisible. I remember the smell of rain coming through the window one night when her fever wouldn't break. I was kneeling by her bed, praying, changing the cool cloth on her forehead, whispering to myself, "She's going to be okay." And when she finally slept, I stayed awake until sunrise, afraid that if I closed my eyes, fate would trick me. No one saw it, no one knew, but I was there. I was always there. The truth is, being a mother is invisible work. We plant, but we don't always see the fruit. We teach, but we don't always receive gratitude. We give our whole selves, and sometimes all we get back is silence. And still, we keep loving, because a mother's love is stubborn. It keeps going, even when it hurts. In the days after that argument, I caught myself walking around the house, touching her things as if trying to bring back time. The hairbrush left in a drawer, the coat hanging behind the door, the mug she painted as a child. Every little thing seemed to whisper, "You didn't fail." But my heart, still bruised, didn't quite believe it yet. I thought about calling, about sending a message, asking if she was okay, pretending nothing happened. But pride held me back. And maybe, for the first time, that pride protected me. Because the love that always chased after her now needed to learn how to wait. The wound hurt deeply, but it also made me look at myself. I realized that for so many years I had lived through her. My dreams, my plans, everything revolved around her happiness. And without noticing, somewhere along the way, I forgot about my own. It was as if my life only had value when she was okay, but now she was telling me that I was worth nothing. It took me a while to understand that sometimes the love we give becomes a mirror, and our children only see the reflection of what they can't yet accept in themselves. Maybe she called me a failure because, deep down, she was afraid of seeing in me what she still fears becoming. The love between a mother and daughter is like that, deep, beautiful, but full of thorns. I remember one morning, standing by the window, watching the sunrise, and asking God, what does it really mean? To win? Because if winning means having money, status, titles, then maybe I did fail. But if winning means raising someone with love, integrity, and courage, then I've won many times. I won every sleepless night, every hidden tear, every time I smiled at her while my heart was breaking. I never needed medals. My trophy was always seeing her move forward. But in that moment, it felt like she had forgotten who taught her how to walk. The wound of pride is a tricky one. It doesn't bleed on the outside, but it eats you alive from within. I tried to hide it, but my empty gaze gave me away. I looked at my hands, marked by time, and remembered how often they'd been shelter, comfort, and sustenance. And now, those same hands trembled, not from weakness, but from sorrow. People think a mother's strength means not crying, but it's the opposite. A mother's strength is in continuing while she cries. It's in loving even after hearing words that shatter her. It's in enduring what no one else could and still holding her head high. Love and hurt started to share the same space inside me. I loved and ached in the same breath, sometimes in the same second. It was a storm of emotions only a mother could understand. I didn't know if I wanted to hold her or disappear, but I knew somehow I would still protect her, even in silence. One afternoon, I sat in the living room and looked at a picture of us. She was still a teenager, hair messy, smile wide. I was beside her, holding her, close, with that look of a woman who still believes love is enough to hold the world together. And that's when I realized how much things change, how time transforms everything. Because love remains, but people don't stay the same. Even wounded, I knew, it was still love, hurt love, tired love, but love. Because only love has the power to survive after so much pain. And deep down, I knew that one day she'd understand. Maybe not now, maybe not with me, but life would teach her. That's when I understood something important. Pain is also a teacher. It teaches what love couldn't bring itself to say. And as I tried to understand the reason behind everything, I started to see that maybe this pain had a purpose, that maybe, buried within the wound, was an answer I wasn't ready to see yet. So I decided that phrase wouldn't define me. I might be hurt, but I wasn't defeated. Because the woman that lives inside every mother is stronger than any word spoken in anger. And now I want to tell you something, from one mother to another, from heart to heart. If someone you love ever called you a failure, don't accept that as truth. You know how hard you fought, how many nights you cried in silence, how many times you did the impossible just to keep everything standing. You know the strength you carry, even when the world insists on forgetting. And before I go on with this story, I want to ask you one thing. If this video is speaking to you, if some part of this pain also lives in your heart, subscribe now. Because here, every story is a mirror, and every word, a hug. This channel exists to remind you that you are not alone. And yes, there is healing. There is a new beginning. There is strength inside you. Don't put it off. Click now, because the next stories will touch you in ways you may not even be ready for. They'll remind you that love, even when wounded, is still the greatest power there is. After everything that happened, I began to relive the past as if I were walking through an old house. Every memory had its own scent, its own color, its own pain. Sometimes I'd just glance at a corner of the room, and there she was, small, messy-haired, laughing loud, calling for me. And that's when the heart aches the most, because memories don't age. They keep alive a version of us that no longer exists. I remember the beginning of it all. It wasn't easy being a mother alone. When she was born, The world felt too big for me. I had no one to share the fear, the exhaustion. It was just me, her, and faith. Money was scarce, time even more so, but love was infinite. I worked all day and at night rushed home with my heart racing just to see her sleeping. Sometimes I'd stand there watching her chest rise and fall, whispering a thank you to God for another day survived. There were nights I had to choose between eating dinner and buying her milk, and I chose the milk, without hesitation. With an empty stomach, I'd watch her drink and think, it's worth it. It was always worth it. The clothes I didn't buy for myself, the shoes I mended instead of replacing, the sleep I lost, all of it was love disguised as sacrifice. I remember the first time she got sick. I didn't have money for medicine. I ran to the pharmacy and begged to pay later. And the pharmacist, maybe moved by something divine, agreed. I never forgot that. I stayed by her bed all night, changing cool cloths on her forehead, whispering, "It'll pass, my love. It'll pass." And it did. But the memory of that fear stayed with me forever. I worked every job you can imagine, cleaning, sewing, cooking for others, taking care of other people's kids, while mine grew up saying her first words without me there. Each job was a battle. I'd come home exhausted, hands aching, feet throbbing. But the moment I heard Mom, it was all worth it. Love is the only force that can make the impossible feel light. There was one night it rained so hard the house flooded. I remember stacking the furniture on chairs, holding her in my arms so her feet wouldn't touch the water, and while the wind slammed against the window and fear gripped my chest, I promised myself she would have a different life, that she'd never have to go through this. I didn't know how, but I knew I'd find a way. And I did. I did what no one saw. I did what no one thanked me for. I did what only a mother can do, give up herself so another can have a chance at happiness. I heard criticism so many times, judgment, sideways looks. People said I should have chosen better, waited longer, thought things through. But who stops to think when love calls? I chose her life, and I'd choose it 1,000 times again, even if the world said I was wrong. When she grew up, I wanted to be the kind of mother who supports, not the one who cages. I encouraged her to study, to dream, to travel. I wanted her to know the world was too big to live in fear. I wanted her to have everything I didn't: freedom, choice, opportunity. I remember the first day she left for work. I stood by the window, watching her walk away. It was the same feeling I had when I took her to school for the first time: pride and a lump in my throat. It felt like every step she took was also a victory of mine. But over time, I realized the world out there was shaping her in ways I could no longer control. She began to see life through different eyes, maybe sharper, maybe colder. And without even noticing, she started looking at me as if I were part of a past she wanted to leave behind. That was what hurt the most, because I had spent my whole life fighting for her future. And in the end, I was the one trapped in the past. A mother's love is a strange thing. We don't crave recognition, yet we miss it. We don't need applause, but sometimes we ache for a tender look. I never wanted her to thank me. I just didn't want to be forgotten. But the world moves fast, time is cruel, and people get distracted. She grew up, drifted away, her voice changed, her gaze shifted. What once was sweetness turned into impatience, and I, who had always been her shelter, somehow became her obstacle. Many nights I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of cold coffee, thinking about everything I'd lived to get here. The scars on my hands, my tired body, my heart still pulsing with love. And I asked myself, does she know? Deep down, does she understand the price that was paid for every step she took? But I don't hold resentment, because deep down, I know she's not to blame. Youth is like that. It believes love will always be there, like a house with the lights on. And in a way, that's true. A mother's love is exactly that, a house that never turns off the light. Still, it's impossible not to feel the weight of what was left behind, the life I didn't live, the dreams that fell asleep. I wanted to study more, to travel, to love again. But every time life gave me those chances, I looked at her and chose to stay. I remember the first time she achieved something big, an award at school, a promotion at work. I was there, sitting in the audience, hands trembling, my heart bursting with pride. She walked onto the stage, smiling, beautiful, strong, and I thought it was all worth it. But in the middle of the applause, I realized she didn't look for me in the crowd. It was as if, for a moment, I had disappeared. That's what motherhood does. It teaches you how to be invisible, without ever ceasing to be essential. We're always there, even when no one notices. We are the roots, the ground, the foundation, but the world only sees the flowers. Today, looking back, I have no regrets, because every struggle shaped who I am. I didn't become a bitter woman. I became a strong one, a woman who learned that sometimes loving means accepting being forgotten and still choosing to love anyway. But I'll admit, there are days when the longing takes over. I miss the little girl who used to hug me tight, the daughter who believed in me, the bond that time quietly stole. In those moments, my heart feels heavy, yet a soft voice inside whispers, "You didn't fail. You just loved too much." And that's what I want you to understand. Loving too much isn't weakness, it's courage. The courage to stay when everything tells you to leave, the courage to fight alone, to rise when the world looks away, to raise a child when life turns its back on you. So when someone calls you a failure, remember everything you've already conquered, every sleepless night, every swallowed tear, every quiet sacrifice. That's victory. That's greatness. That's love in its purest form. And if you're listening to me right now, feeling the weight of the past, thinking no one sees what you've done, I want to tell you something. Your story matters. It's made of strength, of faith, of resilience. And here, on this channel, it will always be honored. So before we continue, do something for yourself. Subscribe now. It's not just to follow a video, it's to walk this path together. Here, every story mirrors yours, and every word is a reminder that love, even when forgotten, is never in vain. Click that button, because what comes next will reach the deepest part of you, and I want you here with me to feel it. I knew this day would come, even if I didn't want to believe it. The tension had been building, in half-spoken sentences, in silences that lasted too long, in eyes that avoided meeting mine. We always know when something is about to break, when love starts turning into something that hurts, and it happened on an ordinary afternoon, one of those days when the sunlight fills the room and nothing seems capable of going wrong. She came home already angry. The keys hit the table hard, the sharp sound echoing through the house. I was in the kitchen and turned slowly. I could feel the heaviness in the air before she even spoke. A mother's heart is a quiet radar. It senses before it understands. "I can't take it anymore, Mom." That's what she said first. Her voice shook, not from weakness, but from contained anger. I approached her carefully, trying to understand what lay behind those words. "What happened, honey?" And she answered with something that tore through me like a bullet. "What happened is I'm tired of being the daughter of a woman who never made it in life." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Those words didn't seem to fit inside my body. Never made it in life. They sounded louder than they should have. And what destroyed me wasn't the insult itself. It was realizing that she truly believed it. I wanted to answer, but my voice failed me. I looked at her, this grown woman, with the same hands that once fit inside mine, and I saw she wasn't my little girl anymore. She was someone who had built a wall between us. She kept talking, each sentence harsher than the last. She said I got too comfortable, that I never aimed higher, that I spent my life complaining and hiding behind the excuse of motherhood, that the world moved on and I stayed behind. As she spoke, I saw my reflection in her eyes, a distorted version of myself, as if she saw a woman who had never existed. Every word cut like glass, and still, I kept listening, because that's what mothers do. We listen, even when everything inside us wants to run away. I tried to say something. "Sweetheart, you don't know what I've been through." But she interrupted me. "Oh, Mom, enough with that suffering story. Everyone struggles, everyone fights. You settled for less, and now you want me to think that's noble." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I looked at her and saw a mix of pain and pride. Too much pride to admit she was hurting, too much pain to realize how much she was hurting me. I sat down slowly, trying to keep the tears from falling, but they came anyway, and in that moment, she looked away. Maybe she regretted it for a second, but pride wouldn't let her turn back. A mother's pain doesn't make noise. It hides quietly inside. As I cried in silence, she stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "I need space." Then she left. I stood there, staring at the closed door, her words echoing inside my head. Never made it in life. My hands trembled, my heart ached, but my mind kept spinning. What does it mean to make it, anyway? Isn't love a form of victory? Isn't raising a child alone, with dignity, a triumph? Isn't surviving, when life takes everything from you, also a kind of success? I spent hours walking around the house, as if trying to run away from myself. I looked at the walls, at the old photos, at the invisible trophies of my battles, and realized she never really knew how much I had won. She didn't see the nights I slept on the floor so she could have the only mattress in the house. She didn't see the days I walked miles to save bus money so I could buy her school supplies. She didn't see the times I swallowed humiliation just to keep my job and put food on the table. And that's okay. Maybe she truly didn't know. Because a mother's love doesn't show itself. It gives itself quietly. But to hear from my own daughter that all of that meant nothing, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. Like every sacrifice, every choice, every tear had been for nothing. I kept thinking about how we'd gotten to that point, when respect had slipped away. Maybe it was when she grew up, and the world started telling her that success meant money, titles, attention. Maybe it was when, without realizing it, I became the reflection of everything she swore she'd never be. And even then, I couldn't feel anger. Love is strange. It endures even what it shouldn't. All I could feel was a pain so deep it tore through me from the inside. That night, the house was silent. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands, the same ones that once held hers to cross the street. I thought of how many times I'd said, "Be careful, don't run, don't go too far." And now, who was there to protect me from all this? I closed my eyes and tried to remember her little girl voice, the innocent, "I love you, Mommy," before the world taught her the weight of pride. And I realized that little girl was still there, somewhere inside the woman who hurt me. I just needed to find her again. The days that followed were a desert. No calls, no messages. I'd stare at my phone as time crawled by. Pride kept me from reaching out, but my heart kept pulling me in the opposite direction. It was a war, love on one side, hurt on the other. Sometimes I imagined what she might be thinking. Did she regret it? Did she sleep well after that? Did she think of me when she passed a place that smelled like home? But I knew time has its own way of teaching. Life, sooner or later, brings back the echo of the words we throw into the world. And if you're listening right now, type this in the comments. Silence speaks because it's true. Sometimes silence is the only possible answer when love is put to the test. I kept living, even with my heart in pieces. I made coffee, watered the plants, folded the laundry, everything just like before, but nothing felt the same. Because when love breaks, it doesn't make a sound, but it changes the air in the house. Days turned into weeks, and her words still haunted me. But little by little, something inside me began to shift. I realized that even a mother's love has limits, not to punish, but to survive. And for the first time, I started thinking about myself. But back then, it still hurt too much to find meaning. All I knew was that something inside me had broken, and maybe it would never be the same again. The house went quiet after the door closed. A different kind of silence, thick, heavy, filled with invisible echoes. The air itself felt hard to breathe. I sat down in the chair where she'd been just minutes before, my body still vibrating, with the sound of the words that had cut through me. No neighbor would ever guess a storm had just passed through this house. On the outside, everything looked the same. The clock kept ticking. The coffee sat cold on the table. The wind whispered through the cracks in the window. But inside me, everything had collapsed. I didn't feel anger. I felt an emptiness so vast it filled every corner of me. Anger shouts. Emptiness just consumes. I stared at the coffee cup, at the marks time had left on, the furniture, at the photos on the wall. Every detail carried a piece of her. The tablecloth stained with paint from her childhood, the vase she broke, and I glued back together, the little note that said, "I love you, Mommy." Now, all of it was a memory of a time when love was simple and enough. Her words played in my head like a broken record. "You never made it in life." I heard them as I washed dishes, folded clothes, lay down at night trying to sleep. And I kept wondering, when did love turn into judgment? When did affection become accusation? Maybe it was when the world started teaching that success is measured by what you have, not by what you feel. I went days without speaking to anyone. The phone rang, and I let it ring. I didn't want to explain something I couldn't even understand myself. Sometimes silence is the only language left when the soul is tired. I didn't want advice or pity or excuses. I just wanted quiet. I wanted to hear the sound of my own heart trying to heal. In those first mornings, I woke with swollen eyes and a dry throat. I made coffee out of habit, not desire. The smell filled the kitchen and brought memories. Her as a child, asking for more sugar, our laughter, our talks. Now the only sound was the clock ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Every second reminded me that time doesn't stop, not even when we fall apart. At times I thought about calling. I wanted to hear her voice, even if it was cold. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Fear of hearing something that would hurt even more. Maybe it was pride, trying to protect what was left of me. Or maybe it was my heart, asking for rest. I needed that silence, not to punish, but to understand. It was in that silence that I began to see what I couldn't before. I realized love can be so loud, it drowns out our own voices. I had spent so many years explaining, defending, trying to be understood, that I forgot what it was to simply be. Silence forced me to look inward, and what? I found there was a mix of pain and tenderness. I thought of my own mother. I remembered how, when I was young, I judged her too. I said things that still hurt me to remember. Back then, I thought I knew everything. I thought she was weak for staying quiet, that she was complacent for accepting life as it was. Now I understand. She wasn't weak, she was wise. Her silence was a form of love. It was how she chose not to return pain with more pain. I started to realize my daughter might just be repeating what I once did, and that realization, as bitter as it was, brought me a sliver of peace. Life is a mirror. What we send out always finds its way back. At night, I would light a candle and leave it on the table. It wasn't a ritual. It was a silent conversation with God. In my thoughts, I'd say, I don't know what to do, but please teach me not to let love die. And somehow, I felt he was listening, because slowly, the pain began to settle. It didn't disappear, but it found a place to rest. The days dragged on. I went through my routines just like before, but something in me had changed. The anger I never felt gave way to a strange kind of compassion. I looked around and thought, one day she'll understand. Maybe not today, maybe not while I'm still here, but time has its own mysterious ways of teaching. The silence slowly became a shelter. I learned to like it. I started listening to the sound of the rain without hurry, the birds singing in the morning, the distant noise of people walking down the street. It was as if, after so much emotional noise, I could finally hear the world again. Sometimes my heart would tighten. I missed her like an unexpected wave that crashes and retreats. I'd close my eyes and see her little face, messy hair, crooked smile. I thought about how cruel time can be. It takes away the most beautiful things we have without asking permission. But at the same time, time also heals. It doesn't erase, but it softens the edges of pain. I started writing little notes to myself, short sentences to remind me to breathe. You didn't fail. Love still lives. Wait for time. I'd leave them around the house, on the fridge, the mirror, inside a book. It was my way of staying whole. One day I wrote her a letter, not to send, just to take the weight off my chest. I wrote everything, the love, the longing, the pride, the wound. I told her that even hurt, I still believed in her, that her words hadn't changed what I felt. They had only taught me to feel differently. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it inside a box with other memories. It was the first step toward forgiveness, not the kind that excuses someone else, but the kind that sets you free. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding that the pain will no longer be in charge of you. I still remember every word, but they don't cut anymore. They just exist, like scars that tell a story. And slowly, I saw something beautiful. Silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. It was the space where love could breathe again, without shouting, without defenses. I began to understand that sometimes silence is the only bridge possible between two wounded hearts. One morning, while I was making coffee, the phone buzzed. A familiar number. I didn't open it. I let the sound echo through the kitchen. My heart raced, but my hands stayed steady. Silence had taught me that not every answer needs to come right away. Sometimes you have to let time speak first. And if you hear me now and you understand this kind of silence, the kind that hurts and heals at the same time, write the word breath in the comments. Because that's what forgiveness is, a breath after the storm. That day, the sky was gray, but inside me, there was a soft light. For the first time in a long while, I realized I didn't want to prove anything anymore. Not to her, not to the world. What I needed to prove, I'd already proven to myself, and that was enough. There was still a long road ahead toward healing, but the first step had been taken. Love was still alive, quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment to show itself again. And as the day ended, I finally understood. Silence wasn't the end. It was just the space between pain and forgiveness, a sacred, necessary pause where the heart finally learns to rest. After so much silence, I began to find refuge in memories. They came uninvited, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes while washing dishes or looking out the window. Time has that power. It lets the past visit us when we least expect it. And that's how I began remembering my victories, the small triumphs I had long forgotten. I remembered when she was little and fell off her bike for the first time. I ran, desperate to help, but when I got close, she looked at me with tearful eyes and said, between fear and pride, "Don't cry, Mom, I can get up." And she did. Scraped knee, dirty clothes, with the most beautiful smile in the world. That day, I understood that strength isn't taught through words. It's taught through example. From a young age, I had to be the example I never had. I faced life with no guidebook, no help, no applause. And even in the hardest seasons, I never let her see me give up. When there was no money, I invented games to distract her from hunger. When fear tightened my chest, I smiled to make her believe everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would. I was a wall, even when I was cracking inside. She grew up watching me fight, leaving early for work, even when I was sick or exhausted. She saw me endure injustice in silence, because sometimes speaking meant losing the little we had. And now, looking back, I can see she learned to be strong because of it. What she calls weakness was, in truth, the foundation of the courage that carries her today. I remember the cold mornings when I'd wake her for school, and she'd curl up under the blanket. "Come on, sweetheart. Courage is getting up even when you don't want to." She'd grumble, complain, but she'd get up. Years later, as an adult, she told me, "Mom, today I understand that the discipline you taught me is what got me where I am." I smiled because in that moment, without realizing it, she had acknowledged me. I also remember when she came home crying because a friend had humiliated her at school. I held her close and said, "Sweetheart, you don't need anyone to choose you for you to have worth." She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and went back the next day with her head held high. I watched from the window, hidden. She never knew, but I was there, cheering her on, just like always. There were so many silent lessons. I taught her that honesty is wealth no one can steal, that humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom, that forgiveness isn't submission, it's freedom. I taught her that we can lose everything except our dignity, and maybe that's why she grew up too strong, sometimes too hard, because she learned from me never to depend on anyone to survive. A mother's love is curious. We plant flowers, and sometimes the world gives back thorns. I taught my daughter to be resilient, but I forgot to teach her that it's okay to rest. I taught her to fight, but not how to ask for help. And maybe that's why, today, she confuses vulnerability with weakness. She doesn't know that it was my very fragility that made me strong. There was one day, I remember it clearly, when she came home, crying. She'd gotten a low grade at school. She was disappointed, afraid she'd let me down. I sat beside her and said, "Making mistakes is the most beautiful way to learn." She looked at me, surprised, and smiled shyly. That day, I saw hope come back to her eyes, and now I think, if she remembers me one day, I hope she remembers that. The kind of love that forgives even mistakes, the embrace that doesn't demand, the affection that doesn't expect perfection. The years went by, and each season brought new challenges. When she started working, I saw the same light in her eyes that I once had. that hunger to conquer the world. And even when she judged me, even when she said I didn't understand her generation, I knew, deep down, she carried within her the strength I had planted. I saw her face heartbreaks, disappointments, losses. I saw her cry in secret, trying to look strong, and in those moments, even from afar, my heart always knew. It's as if there's an invisible thread connecting a mother's heart to her daughters. Distance can't cut it, silence can't erase it. That bond endures even when words are lost. One day, while I was organizing some old boxes, I found an essay she'd written as a child. The title read, "My Mother is an Example." I read it and cried. It said, "She teaches me that we can fall, but we must get up smiling." I stood there, holding the trembling paper in my hands. How cruel time can be, I thought, because somewhere along the way she forgot. She forgot where that strength she's so proud of came from. I haven't forgotten, because every one of her victories carries a trace of my sweat. Every achievement of hers holds one of my prayers. Every steady step she's ever taken had a mother on her knees, asking heaven to make the ground beneath her safe. I remember the day she got her first job. Her smile was pure sunlight. She held up her badge proudly and said, "Now I can help you." I held the badge, looked at her, and said, "You've been helping me since the day you were born." And it was true, because she gave me a reason to keep going, even when I had no strength left. Sometimes I think my daughter has no idea what kind of woman I had to become so she could be who she is today. I faced the world with no shield, and still, I built something time could never destroy. A daughter strong, independent, and brave. And if one day she realizes that, if one day she looks beyond my flaws, maybe she'll see that it wasn't fate that shaped her. It was me. I was the one who taught her to endure, who showed her that love is stronger than any pain, who stood tall when life tried to break me. When I look at her now, I see reflections of myself in everything she does. When she raises her voice, that's me. When she hides to cry, that's me too. When she smiles to disguise the pain, it's me, once again. That's what love does. It multiplies us, even when it forgets where it came from. The world calls it parenting. I call it a miracle, because turning pain into strength is the greatest miracle a mother can live. And if you're listening to me now and you've also taught someone to be strong, even without getting gratitude in return, type this in the comments. I taught too. Because a mother's love is exactly that. A lesson without a classroom, without exams, without diplomas. Yet it shapes character, molds destinies, and leaves eternal marks. Every memory reminded me that, no matter how forgotten I felt, nothing was in vain. What I did out of love still lives inside her, even if she doesn't realize it yet. And that kind of victory, time can't erase. Sometimes I think love is a stubborn seed. You plant it and think it's died, but one day, without warning, it blooms again. Strong, beautiful, alive. Maybe a mother's love is like that, a flower that blooms in silence, even after the storm. And with that thought, I fell asleep that night. My heart still ached, but it was a different kind of ache now. A gentle, almost sweet pain, like someone who's finally understood that loving means giving without expecting anything back. I closed my eyes and drifted off, carried by memories of triumph, knowing that love, true love, always finds a way to stay. There's a part of life no one teaches you how to revisit, the part where you existed before becoming a mother. It's like a forgotten drawer in an old cabinet, full of memories, dreams, and versions of who you once were, pushed so far back by time that they nearly vanished. And it was there, between one memory and another, that I started searching for the woman I was before I was simply Mom. I remember who I used to be, the girl who dreamed of traveling, who loved to dance, who scribbled in old notebooks about all the places she wanted to see. I had plans, I had desires, I had light. I had a laugh that filled every corner of a room, a curious gaze at the world, and a fearless, innocent belief that anything was possible. Motherhood came, like a lightning bolt of love, beautiful, powerful, but overwhelming. And suddenly, that whole woman I had been dissolved into a single word, mother. I stopped being me and became us. My wants gave way to needs. My dreams were postponed, and that later never came. But now, With a quieter house and a wiser heart, I began to dig into that forgotten part of myself. I started to remember the sound of my own laughter, how I loved the smell of rain, how I used to get ready, not for anyone else, but for me. I remembered the songs that made me dance alone in the living room. I remembered the feeling of freedom, walking down the street with no rush, no reason, no one waiting. And I realized something that hurt and healed me at the same time. I didn't fail. I lived to love. I transformed because of love. And without even realizing it, I became the strongest version of myself I've ever been. Being a mother never erased the woman. It just hid her for a while. I began to notice it in the little things, how I still love fresh flowers on the table, the urge to dye my hair, the curiosity to learn something new. It's as if that woman has been knocking on the door, asking to live again. I started going out for walks. The wind brushed my face, and for a moment, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The sound of my own footsteps reminded me that I still exist, beyond the roles life gave me. As I walked, I thought about everything I'd lived, the pain, the sacrifices, the silences. And for the first time, I didn't feel regret. I felt respect. Respect for myself, for holding up the world with my bare hands, for loving when no one else did, for believing when everything seemed lost. I remembered the first time I looked in the mirror after becoming a mother. I didn't recognize the reflection. My eyes had a different light. My body carried new marks. I thought I had lost something. But now I know I didn't lose. I gained layers. Every wrinkle, every line, every scar tells a story time can't erase. Motherhood transformed me, but being a woman keeps me alive. And now I understand that the two don't compete. They coexist. I can be love and desire, tenderness and strength, comfort and courage. I can care for others and still deserve care. For so long they told me I had to choose, that I couldn't be everything. But who said that? Who convinced women they have to fit into molds? I spent years trying to be perfect, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the woman who never fails, until I realized perfection is a prison. What truly frees you is truth. And my truth is this: I am made of love, but also of fire. I am calm and chaos. I am a mother, but also a woman. I am someone who created a life, and now I'm creating my own again. In those reflections, I found old photographs, me, younger, smiling beside friends, hair loose, the whole world ahead of me. I stared for minutes, trying to remember what that woman was thinking, what she dreamed of. And I couldn't help but smile, because somehow that girl still lives in me. She was just asleep. I began to reclaim small joys. I started writing again, taking care of myself again. I bought a new lipstick, not to hide my tiredness, but to celebrate what's left of me after so much giving. I played an old song and danced alone in the living room. And as I danced, I realized there's still life inside me, still light. And it's important I say this to you who are listening. You can find yourself again, too. You can rediscover who you were before all the titles, before all the obligations, because being a mother is part of who you are, but it's not all you are. There's a woman inside you who deserves to live again. Write in the comments if you want to share this with me. I want to find myself again. These words have power. When you write them, you begin to remember that a part of you is still waiting to live. I know it's not always easy. Sometimes the mirror hurts. Sometimes loneliness is frightening. Sometimes guilt whispers that it's selfish to think about yourself. But listen, it's not selfishness, it's survival. The woman who lives inside the mother also needs to breathe. I began to understand that to keep loving well, I first needed to love myself. That to care for others with lightness, I had to care for myself with tenderness. And in that awakening, I realized something profound. Failure isn't falling short of perfection. Failure is erasing yourself just to fit into someone else's expectations. So if you're hearing me now and feel like you've lost pieces of yourself along the way, know this: they're still there. Sometimes they're hidden inside an old song, a memory, a postponed dream. But they're there, and time, with gentleness, will return each one to you. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a whole woman, not because she has everything, but because she finally accepts herself. I carry pain, I carry scars, but I also carry the courage of someone who survived them all. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that motherhood didn't steal from me. It multiplied me. I didn't stop being a woman. I became many, and each of them still beats inside me. Now I want to tell you something important, from heart to heart. If this story speaks to you, if at any moment you've seen yourself in my words, subscribe to this channel. Here, every video is a mirror of the soul. Here, we talk about the pains no one dares to confess, but everyone feels. Subscribe, because what's coming will transform you. It will remind you of the woman you once were and help you reconnect with the woman you've always been. The stories ahead will touch wounds time hasn't healed, but that can still bloom into strength. Click now, not for me, but for you, because this channel is more than a place for stories. It's a place for healing, and your healing begins the moment you decide to keep listening. That night, as the wind blew outside and the house seemed to breathe in silence, I felt the weight of a truth I had avoided for years. I carried too much guilt for not being the perfect mother, for failing in moments that now seem so small, but back then felt like the end of the world. Guilt for not protecting enough, not understanding enough, not being strong enough when she needed me most. And worst of all, guilt for erasing myself, believing that's what love demanded. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into nothing, hands clasped together like someone seeking forgiveness from herself, and I started to cry. But it wasn't a desperate cry. It was a clean cry, one that washed the soul. The tears came slowly, as if each one carried a piece of the pain I had stored for years. Guilt is a ghost that lives inside every mother. It shows up when your child gets sick, when things go wrong, when life takes them far away. We always believe we could have done more. Maybe that's both the curse and the blessing of motherhood. Love that never feels enough. I remembered all the times I lost my patience, the scoldings that came from exhaustion, the days I wished I could disappear for just a moment, and then felt like a monster for even thinking it. I remembered birthdays that didn't turn out how I wanted, promises postponed, days when money ran out but love somehow didn't. And there, between tears and memories, something began to shift inside me. Because for the first time, I looked at myself with tenderness. I saw the woman who did the best she could, with what she had, in the time she had. I saw the mother who made mistakes trying to do right, who loved the only way she knew how, who gave more than she received, and still kept going. I did what I could, and maybe that's what every mother really does. What she can, what her heart can bear, what her circumstances allow, what life permits. And if that's not enough, it's only because the world still doesn't understand the size of a mother's love. I began to remember old conversations with my own mother, the times I judged her without knowing her pain, how many times I called her cold, distant, without realizing how hard she was fighting in silence to hold everything together. And I realized judgment is always easier than understanding. Maybe my daughter is still in that stage, the stage of demanding, of blame. Maybe time still needs to ripen in her what only life can teach. Because real love doesn't come ready-made. It's molded through loss, through distance, through mistakes. And one day, when she looks at me with the same eyes I now use to look at my mother, maybe she'll understand. Forgiveness started to bloom inside me like a soft breeze. I didn't forgive to forget. I forgave to move forward. Because holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to hurt. Resentment destroys slowly, and I didn't want to carry it anymore. I spent years pressuring myself, believing I had to be the example all the time, that I couldn't fail, that being a mother meant being perfect. But now I know perfection is just loneliness in disguise. Real love lives in imperfection. It breathes in the trying, the failing, the starting over. I looked around and realized how many women are trapped in that same guilt. Women who gave everything and still feel it wasn't enough. Women who love so much they forget to exist. And if you're listening to me right now and you feel that too, I want you to repeat these words out loud so your soul can hear them. I did what I could. Write it here in the comments if you want, because it's freeing. Those 4 words are a hug for every woman who blames herself too much. The guilt began to dissolve as I accepted my humanity. I'm not made of steel. I'm made of flesh, of tears, of faith, and everything I did with love. And love, when it's real, is enough. I began to see my story differently. every hardship I faced, every choice I made, every sleepless night. All had purpose. I didn't live in vain. No mother does. Every gesture, every sacrifice, every act of giving is a seed that time will one day make bloom, even if we never see it. I also learned that forgiveness isn't just freeing someone else. It's freeing yourself. It's looking in the mirror and saying, you did your best, and believing it. Because love isn't made of perfection. It's made of effort. And I tried. I tried every single day. That night, after so many tears, I lit a candle and watched the flame dance in the dark. I thought to myself, this is what a mother's love is like. Sometimes fragile, but always steady. Even when the wind blows, it flickers, but it never goes out. I closed my eyes and imagined my daughter as a child again. I remembered her scent, the touch of her hands, the sound of her laughter. I remembered how she looked at me as if I were her whole world, and for a moment, I felt that love again, hidden behind the anger, the pride, the hurtful words. It was still there, just sleeping. That's when I finally understood forgiveness. It doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It comes in small doses, in the thoughts that stop hurting, in the memories that stop bleeding, in the heart that begins to beat softly again. Forgiveness is sunrise after a long night, and I want to tell you, from mother to mother, from soul to soul, don't carry guilt that isn't yours. You didn't fail for loving too much. You didn't do wrong for not having everything. You didn't lose for giving so much of yourself. You simply lived, and living, with all its pain and beauty, is already an act of courage. I did what I could, and for me now, that's enough. As I write these words, I feel a different kind of peace. Not because everything is fixed, but because I've learned how to breathe within what remains. I've learned that love doesn't need to be understood to keep being love. It simply is. And if you still feel guilt, if you still think you could have done more, I want to ask you one thing. Don't leave without freeing yourself. Subscribe to the channel now. Here, every story is a mirror of your soul. Here you'll remember that perfection is a myth, and that imperfect love is the most human kind of all. Subscribe, because this is your place of healing, your refuge, your safe corner. The stories to come will help you see beauty behind the pain, strength within vulnerability, and faith reborn from exhaustion. Click now, because this isn't just about listening. It's about finding yourself again, and your journey of forgiveness and rebirth continues here, with me. Life has a curious way of teaching. It doesn't shout, it doesn't point fingers, it doesn't demand explanations. It simply turns, and when the wheel spins, what once seemed far away comes back around, carrying lessons we didn't even know we needed to learn. Months had passed since that painful last conversation. The silence between us still existed, but it no longer hurt the same. It was a different kind of silence, mature, almost respectful. I no longer waited for a call. I no longer counted the days. I had accepted that some distances aren't punishment. They're necessary pauses, so love can learn how to breathe again. But destiny, with its quiet wisdom, decided it was time to move the pieces once more. It happened one ordinary morning. I was sweeping the yard when the phone rang. The number was familiar, but my heart refused to believe it. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. For a moment I hesitated, unsure if I was ready. I took a deep breath and swiped my finger across the screen. On the other end, her voice, shaky, weak, breaking. Mom, just that word, and everything inside me came undone. Time stopped. I sat down slowly, my whole body trembling, and said softly, "Hi, my daughter." She was crying, not the impatient cry of someone trying to prove a point, but the broken cry of someone defeated by life. Through sobs, she said, "Mom, I didn't know who else to call. I have no one." In that instant, every wound, every harsh word, every memory that once burned, it all vanished. None of it mattered anymore. Because a mother's heart doesn't store resentment. It stores love, waiting to be used again. Between pauses, she told me that her relationship had ended, that the promises of forever had turned into silence and shouting, that the man who once held the center of her world had left, and she was now alone, facing a pain she didn't know how to carry. I listened, in silence, as I always did. My heart ached, but my soul stayed calm, because in her words, I saw it clearly. Destiny had done what I never could. It had taught her. I could have said, "I told you so." I could have reminded her of everything that hurt. I could have placed pride between us. But love, when it matures, understands that revenge is just a waste of time. All I said was, "Come home, daughter." That day, I made the simplest coffee in the world, but with the fullest heart I'd ever had. I baked a cake, opened the windows, lit some incense. It felt like I was preparing the house to welcome her soul back home. And when I heard the gate creak open, it was as if time had turned back. She walked in slowly, tired eyes, swollen face, heavy shoulders. I didn't say a word. I just opened my arms. She hesitated for a second, then collapsed into them, like someone finally finding shelter after a long storm. We stayed like that for a time I couldn't measure. We cried. Together. But this time the tears weren't from pain. They were from relief. And right there, in the middle of that embrace, I understood the power of destiny. It always brings back what's real, but only after teaching the value of what was lost. In the days that followed, she stayed with me. She slept a lot, spoke little. I respected her silence. Sometimes I'd make coffee and leave it on the table without a word. Sometimes we'd just sit side by side on the couch, listening to the sound of the rain. Love, when it matures, doesn't need speeches. It shows itself through presence. One day, she looked at me and said, "Now I understand what you were always trying to tell me." I smiled, quietly. Some answers don't need words. They're understood through the eyes. She began opening up, little by little, telling me about what she'd been through, the broken promises, the exhaustion, the fear, the loneliness. Every word she spoke hurt me, not from bitterness, but from empathy. It was like reliving the woman I once was, facing the world on my own. Life was simply repeating the cycle, showing her in practice what I had once tried to teach her in words. For the first time, I saw her truly vulnerable. No masks, no certainty, no pride to build a wall between us. It was my daughter again, but now a woman, broken, yes, but rebuilding herself. And I knew then, her pain wasn't punishment, it was passage. That night, she asked to sleep in my room. She said she couldn't be alone. I fixed her pillow, covered her with the blanket, and watched as she fell asleep. Her face, though weary, looked just like when she was a little girl, peaceful, soft, innocent. I brushed her hair gently and thought, life turns, but love always finds its way back home. Days passed, and she began to heal. Sometimes she helped me in the kitchen. Other times, she just sat quietly, watching me, like someone trying to relearn simplicity. And slowly, I began to notice something beautiful. She was mirroring me. The way I stirred the coffee, the way I set the table, even the way I folded clothes. It was as if she had finally realized that the strength she was now using to rebuild herself came from me. One afternoon, as we were washing dishes together, she stopped and said softly, "Mom, I never thanked you for everything." And I replied, with calm certainty, "You don't need to, my love. Life already thanked me by bringing you back." She smiled, a shy but sincere smile. And in that smile, I saw forgiveness, not the kind spoken aloud, but the kind only the eyes can say. Destiny teaches gently. It gives back everything, not as punishment, but as lesson. And her lesson was to understand that the woman she once called a failure was the one who taught her how to win, even this battle. That night, alone in the living room, I thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the distance, the return, and I realized that life truly is a mirror. Everything we give eventually comes back, sometimes as love, sometimes as wisdom. I didn't wish her pain, but I thanked life for the reunion, because if suffering was the price for her to find her way back to me, then it was worth it. And if you're listening to me now and you believe that life always comes full circle, write this in the comments. Life teaches, because it does. It teaches through love, through loss, through time, but it always teaches. That night I looked up at the sky, the stars scattered across the darkness, and felt a quiet gratitude. Life had given me another chance, and I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, all over again. Destiny is wise. It takes its time, but it never fails. It separates so it can reunite. It falls silent so it can later reveal. And when the moment is right, it returns what belongs to us, more mature, more honest, more human. It was there, between the smell of coffee and the quiet hum of night, that I realized love doesn't disappear. It just changes form. And sometimes we have to lose something to understand the beauty of finding it again. Time passed with a tenderness that almost hurt. The days regained their color, but silence still lingered between us. She was home again, but part of her hadn't fully arrived yet. It was as if her body was here, but her soul was still traveling, crossing the distance from regret to forgiveness. In those first days, we didn't speak of the past. I didn't want to. Some things only get heavier when you put them into words. I decided to let time do its quiet work, like a soft breeze arranging fallen leaves without a sound. Love, when it grows up, learns to wait. Life began to return to normal, little by little. She started helping with small things. Sometimes she washed the dishes in silence. Sometimes she swept the yard while listening to the birds. I watched from afar, and every gesture she made was a living memory of who we once were, and somehow still were. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the kitchen window and lit her face. Her hair was tied back, her eyes calm, her hands steady. For a moment, I saw the little girl who once called me her hero. My heart warmed. Time is a patient sculptor. It smooths the rough edges and reveals what's pure. Life had taught her what my words never could, and instead of sadness, that realization brought me peace, because no lesson is stronger than the one taught through pain. And I knew she had hurt, but now, what remained was a new beginning. She started talking more, little by little. She told me how lost she had felt, how close she came to giving up, how afraid she was that I wouldn't want her back. I listened quietly, giving each word space to land inside me. I didn't need to say, "I forgive you." The forgiveness had been there long before the regret. One night, while we were eating dinner, she set down her fork, looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "Mom, I don't know how you can still look at me like that after everything." I smiled, not the smile of someone who ignores pain, but of someone who has survived it. And I answered, "Because love doesn't need explanations, my daughter. It just needs to keep existing." She cried, and I let her. I let her because her tears weren't weakness. They were healing. Each one washed away traces of who we had been, making room for who we could become. There were no formal apologies, no promises, just mutual understanding, the kind of forgiveness that doesn't need words, because silence already says everything. Her eyes searched for mine, and I understood what she couldn't quite say. I came back. "I'm still your daughter. I never stopped loving you." A mother's love is a road with no return. No matter how far a child goes, her heart always remembers the way home. And when they return, time doesn't demand explanations. It simply opens its arms. I began to notice the changes in her. Her softer voice, gentler gestures, wiser eyes. She was a different woman. Now, more human, more aware, less proud. Life had shaped her with the same pain that once shaped me. And somehow, I realized we were finding each other again. Not just as mother and daughter, but as two women who finally understood. One afternoon, we sat on the porch drinking coffee. The wind blew, carrying the smell of fresh cake through the house. She looked at me and said, "Mom, I used to think I had to be different from you to be happy, but now I see that, trying not to be you, I only lost myself." I couldn't find words. My eyes burned with tears. She went on, "I used to think you were just resigned, that you accepted everything in silence. Now I understand. It was courage disguised as calm." Those words were the embrace I had waited years for, a hug without touch, but full of truth, recognition that didn't come when I wanted, but came exactly when life decided it should. That night, before bed, she came to my room. She stood at the doorway for a few seconds, searching for courage, then walked over, sat beside me, and without saying a word, held my hand. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything. My heart raced, recognizing a touch from long ago, and in that moment I understood. Love, even when wounded, never dies. It just waits for the right time to bloom again. She fell asleep against my shoulder, just like when she was little. I stayed awake, watching her breathe. her face peaceful, her body relaxed, the light weight of her head on my arm, and I couldn't help but think of everything we had survived, the love that outlasted pride, the bond that survived harsh words, the reunion that didn't need to be announced, because it had always been inevitable. I woke before sunrise, went to the kitchen, and began making coffee. The smell filled the air, and a lump rose in my throat, not from sadness but from gratitude, because after all this time, life had returned what it once took, her presence, her warmth, her company. When she woke, she came up behind me and wrapped her arms around me, the kind of embrace that says, "Thank you," without words. I closed my eyes and let the moment surround me. Neither a winner nor a failure, just a mother. That's what I was. And for me, that was everything. The world teaches that strength means winning, but life showed me that real strength is continuing to love, even when love seems impossible. I didn't need to be right. I didn't need to be remembered. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stay. And if there's something I want to leave for her, and for you who are listening, it's this. Love isn't measured by recognition, but by endurance. To love is to keep standing even when the heart bleeds, to forgive even when the pain still pulses, to stay even when the whole world says go. Today, she's different, and so am I. We're no longer the same two who hurt each other. We're the ones who learned to love differently, and maybe that's the true miracle of love. It transforms, but it never disappears. And if you've come this far with me, feeling your heart beat differently, I want to ask you one thing, not for me, but for you. Subscribe now to the channel, because here, every story is a mirror of your soul. Here, you'll find what the world tries to silence, the power of love that endures, of pain that teaches, of faith reborn from ruins. Subscribe, because the next video will touch places in you that you may not even realize still hurt. It will remind you that there's no failure. Where there is love, it will show you that even after loss, you can begin again. Click now, because this channel isn't just about stories, it's about you. It's about the woman who fights, who loves, who falls and rises again. It's about the heart that, even tired, still believes. And if love has brought you this far, it's because it still has something to teach you. Time, with its invisible gentleness, slowly stitched together the loose pieces of my soul. There was no anger left, no sadness, just a deep calm, the kind of serenity that only comes when the heart finally understands what the mind never could. I looked at my daughter and saw in her much of who I once was, and also who I had become. I realized that the love between a mother and daughter is a two-way road. Sometimes one walks ahead, sometimes the other, but in the end, the destination is always the same: reunion. I learned that I don't need to win to be victorious. For me, victory doesn't live in applause or recognition. It lives in knowing that even when I was wounded, I still loved. Even when I was forgotten, I stayed. Even when no one believed in me, I bloomed anyway. For a long time, I thought success meant being remembered, admired, praised. But now I know that true success is planting something good in the hearts that cross your path. And if my daughter learned how to be strong, then I have won. Even if she doesn't realize it yet. Love taught me that winning isn't about rising higher. It's about standing tall when everything tries to knock you down. Winning is continuing to believe in goodness when the world invites you to grow bitter. It's forgiving without needing to hear, "I'm sorry." It's loving without needing to be loved back the same way. The quiet victories are the most powerful ones. They don't need a stage or an audience. They happen inside the soul where no one applauds, but the whole universe takes notice. Today, when I think about life, I see that every pain had a purpose. Every distance taught me the value of presence. Every disappointment showed me what truly matters. I no longer expect life to be fair. I just hope for the wisdom to keep a light heart, even when it isn't. There are victories that don't shine, but they heal. Victories that no one sees, but they set you free. And that's my victory. I am free. Free from guilt, from expectations, from the burden of proving anything. Free from the need to be perfect. Free to love without fear, to exist without apology. Motherhood taught me what no book, no belief, no advice ever could. That true love is the only kind that survives the ego. It doesn't need to be right, it only needs to be real. Today, when I look back, I don't see failures, I see chapters. Each one wrote a piece of the woman I became. And if one day I was called a failure, I now understand that it was only the reflection of someone's immaturity, someone who couldn't yet see the worth of the one who raised her. I am the result of everything I have, loved, and that to me is the greatest prize of all. You know, there comes a time in life when you understand that you weren't born to be recognized. You were born to plant, and whoever plants love will sooner or later harvest peace. The greatest victory of my life was not letting bitterness change me. I could have closed my heart, but I chose to keep it open. And because of that, love found its way back. There are days when I still hear the echo of those harsh words. "You're a failure, Mom." But now when they return, they don't hurt. They just remind me of how much I've grown. Because failure isn't falling. Failure is giving up on love. And that I never did. Today, I rest. Not because everything worked out, but because I finally understand that I don't have to fix the world. I just have to keep putting out what's best in me. I look up at the sky and whisper silently to God, "Thank you for teaching me to win the right way." From the inside out, I feel that every tear I've ever shed watered the garden that now blooms within me. Every pain was a seed, and what grows now is faith. Faith that makes me believe nothing is in vain, that every wounded mother will one day heal, that every distant daughter will find her way back, that every story that feels like an ending is really a beginning in disguise. And if you're hearing me right now, know this: love never abandons you. It just changes form to teach you something new. Sometimes it goes quiet so you can learn to listen to your own heart. Sometimes it steps back so you can find yourself again. But it always comes back, purer, lighter, truer. Now I understand that the greatest legacy I can leave isn't wealth or achievement. It's love. The love that endures, that believes, that transforms. The love that teaches even without words. The love that doesn't need to win, because it already is the victory. The woman I am today doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. I've found peace in the simple act of being a mother, being a woman, being a soul. And that is everything. And before this video ends, I want to ask you something. From my heart to yours, stay with me, because the next video appearing on your screen will touch you in a different way. It's not a continuation of this story, but a new truth, a new mirror, a new awakening. If this story spoke to you, what's coming next will move you even more. It's another soul showing you the power of faith, strength, and resilience, the very essence of the Matriarch Secrets. So don't leave now. Tap the video on your screen. Let the next story embrace you too. Because here, every word is healing, every story is a reflection, and every video is another step forward on your own journey. Click. Let yourself feel. Let yourself continue. Because the Matriarch Secrets never ends. It begins again every time a woman awakens to her strength.